I'm out of this. I'm walking. I'll tell you something. I am not just a physical television comedy. I'm walking. Thank you. I've loved doing the show. You're great people. Thanks a great deal. Live from New York, it's Saturday night.
Hello and welcome to the Not Ready for Primetime podcast. We're Gary Seath and Brad Robinson.
And you're not.
Tonight we are watching Season 1, Episode 18 with host Raquel Welch and musical guests Phoebe Snow and John Sebastian. This episode originally aired on April 24th, 1976. Brad?
Yes?
Is it true you spent 6 hours researching Raquel Welch for this episode?
Yeah, I did a lot of research. A lot going on this episode.
All visual research for Raquel Welch?
Surprisingly, there's a lot to say about this episode, I guess. Apparently, for not being one of the stronger ones.
But, now you're being polite.
I don't know. I don't think I disliked it as much as many people do, but I don't know. There's definitely a lot to talk about.
Well, let's get into that. So what is there to talk about around Raquel Welch?
She's another one in a line of interesting guest hosts they've had recently. An icon of 60s and 70s cinema.
Right.
It's another one you're like, why is she on the show? I'm assuming she's there plugging a new movie that was about to come out, which has the wonderful title. It's one of the best movie titles I've ever heard. Mother Jugs and Speed.
Oh.
Where she plays, of course, one of the title characters, Jugs.
Is that a Roger Corman film?
No. It's like her and Bill Cosby and Harvey Keitel and anyway. But this is like mid-70s Raquel Welch. So she's past that, 60s, early 70s sex icon. And now she's trying to become an actress. She's apparently had some variety specials, which I didn't realize in the 70s. I had no idea she could sing well, I would say.
She was fine.
I thought she sang pretty good.
Yeah, I thought she did a fine job. I think it's interesting you said she was past her sex appeal because that's all they talked about this week.
Well, that's all they talk about. But she was at her height, though,
Sure.
mid-60s, right?
I think so.
I mean, it was the mid-60s. She did that movie 100 Million Years BC where she had the infamous poster where she's in the two-piece like deerskin bikini. That was one of the most iconic film posters of all time. I mean, that's 10 years old at this point.
Wow.
And she apparently spent the majority of the week trying to turn down even more boob jokes.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, again, go figure. We know the writing staff and who's on the staff at this point in the male-dominated show. So, of course, she comes on and, to no one's surprise, the vast majority of sketches and bits that are thrown at her are all about her body and her image. So, which it's funny. One of the sketches that got cut that they had written and worked on was something called Planet of the Enormous Hooters, Franken and Davis piece. And as soon as I heard of it, I'm like, that sounds so much like the Dolly Parton sketch. And it's the same exact sketch. They basically pitched it to her. It was supposed to be Raquel Welch with Jane, Gilda, and Lorraine. And they basically ostracize Raquel Welch for not having big enough boobs. And she didn't want to do the sketch, so it got scrapped. They worked up costume ideas and stuff. And I think I've seen pictures of Lorraine holding like the plastic breast piece that they would put on. But she turned it down and didn't want to do it. And they held it. Cut to, 15 years later, Dolly Parton hosts. And Franken and Davis are back on the writing staff, and they do this sketch with her.
That's hilarious.
So the first thing I saw, and I was like, sure enough, it's the same sketch.
That's funny.
They had another sketch that went to dress rehearsal called Take Your Shirt Off, which was a talk show with her and Chevy. And not surprisingly, the whole point of the show was a very short sketch, but the whole thing was he's interviewing Raquel Welch. And he asked her to take your shirt off, and she says no. And they cut away and they say, next week we'll be doing an episode of Take Out Your Eye with guest Sandy Duncan. Oh. And I guess apparently the audience gasped, and she got really freaked out. And so she refused and didn't want to do the show. Do the sketch. But it's funny that, as much as it's been written that she was fending off breast jokes, that's what practically this whole episode is.
Yeah.
If there's not people singing.
Yes. A lot of singing. I did not expect Raquel Welch to sing once, let alone twice.
Let alone twice. Yeah, twice, mind you.
Yeah. And 2 numbers from Phoebe Snow and 1 from John Sebastian. That was a lot of singing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was.
there's a lot here. Well, should we just get into it?
Yeah, it starts off strong. Let's do it. Let's get into it.
So the cold open starts with Chevy seemingly handing out an award for the final category, which is the best performance by an actor in a political campaign. And he runs through political jokes for most of the candidates. At this point, it's the primaries for the 76 election. And he runs through just one-liners for each candidate, really. And then he gets to the end and he asks for the envelope and it says, Chevy, just get to the fall. And he gets angry about that.
And then it turns into another I don't want to fall sketch.
Yep. I'm more than just a physical comedian. I'm a writer. I wrote this sketch, blah, blah, blah. They hand him another one and then he says, I quit. And conveniently, there are a number of folding chairs behind him that we have not seen before.
I do like they cut to a wide shot. He says, I'm walking off. I'm getting off. And of course, there's folding chairs on both sides of the podium.
Yeah. And then you knew what was happening. And he took, again, a really hard
It's a good fall.
Yeah.
It's a very good fall. Yeah, like 2 steps over a chair right off the stage. It's a pretty good fall.
Yeah.
I liked it. Thought it was another good way to do an opening without it being Gerald Ford.
From there, we go to opening credits. This is another one where I'm like, nothing. And then Don Pardo says NBC's Saturday Night again. And I was like, wait, I thought we were past this.
I know. There's a bunch of back and forth of like when they try to lose that credit and the title exactly, and when Lauren tries to pull it away. So I don't know. I feel like it's going to happen again and again.
Yeah. And then Raquel Welch dances out for her monologue.
Does dance out, yeah.
She does. And she makes one weird joke about last week's show and then just starts singing Superstar. A famous, I guess at this point, the Carpenters version of this song had already been out. So it was a well-known, recognizable song.
It was a big hit for the Carpenters, yeah.
Yeah. And she comes out and she does a decent job singing.
I thought so.
Yeah. And then she's joined by Joe Cocker.
I wasn't ready for this. This was good. This was a good addition.
Right? It took me by surprise, too. I was like, what the hell's he doing here?
They do this song on Mad Dogs and Englishmen. His album, his live, is like amazingly great live album from 1970 with Rita Coolidge sings the lead. So it kind of made a little bit more sense then when you put that together. But he's, again, fantastic. And they actually duet really well together. Like she holds her own, I feel like. He could have very easily, like on Update, when he upstages Chevy and takes over the whole stage, they played really well against each other.
Yeah. What I didn't understand was why he ends the bit with the flailing on the floor again.
Yeah, that was a little bit much for me too, as well. Where he falls on the floor and he's rocking.
Really?
Yeah.
It's funny because I was watching that going, this does nothing for me, but Brad's going to love this because it's John.
I love the singing. I mean, he's so good. He's so good. The only thing I liked about the end is when she gets down and he's on the floor, she gets on over him and they're like face to face and they're basically sharing her mic and he just looks up and she came in through the bathroom window. I thought it was pretty funny.
I'll give you that. Yeah.
But at this point, again, I like the opening. I thought this was a pretty good monologue for somebody who, again, isn't really a comedian. So she came out and sung a song, but they did a twist on it.
Right.
So the first 2 bits of the night, I'm feeling good. I think this is looking promising.
Oh.
I don't know how true it holds up, but I was into it at this point of the show.
Were you?
I was.
Because at this point of the show, I was like, I thought the Chevy bit at the open was fine. And then John flailing on the ground really took me out of that last piece. So at this point, I'm thinking the opposite, where I'm like, they're going a little overboard on everything right now. Regardless, we go to our next sketch, which is Gilda and Garrett, essentially in the same set and as the same characters of the parents, right? From the Jill Carver.
My first note was asking, are they playing Julio's parents again?
I believe they were.
Yeah.
But they're in their rundown apartment and talking about their rats. And then Chevy comes in as the Pied Piper who's selling them Purina rat chow. Again, I was like, until they cut away to the little plastic rats eating out of the bowls. Rats? Yeah.
I like the rubber rats. It was
too.
So stupid. It was funny. They're trying to like eat each other's food out of the bowls. It was funny.
Yeah. No, I agree. That was the part that I was like, oh yeah, that works. That is funny. But otherwise I was like, oh, this is okay.
Yeah, decent sketch. I like that it was live, that it wasn't a pre-tape, which was nice. And it was interesting to see Chevy, which he's done a little bit here and there, but Chevy as a pitch man, his comedic talents played well to this. So
yeah, it was a fine commercial.
Yeah.
I thought the next bit was just fine too.
See, I like this next one.
Did you?
I remember this one. I didn't know, I forgot it was from this episode, but I've always liked this sketch. Yeah.
So Dan comes on as Mr. Joseph Franklin of the U.S. Council of Standards and Measures. and he's presenting the new metric alphabet called the decabet. Essentially, it's just a combination of
10
different letters. Yeah, so we have 10.
10 letters. 10 letters now.
Right.
Everything about this looked to be good. Dan, written by Tom Schiller. Like, I was so excited for this. Like, this is set up to be great.
Yeah. And then I just felt like it went on for a while. Like, he comes out and he shows you which letters are being combined and how they're being combined, and goes through all 10 letters, and then starts showing examples of words. And those were the ones that I was like, oh, we're doing more words here? Okay.
I don't know. I thought this all worked. I like how he showed the letters, and A, B, C, D stays the same. E, G gets combined into one. Element OP, which works out well for all you people who thought element OP was a letter, and
right,
the garbage letters at the end, so you somehow get 10. And then I thought the joke really works when he starts showing you letters and how they have new phonetic tellings on how you're going to say these new words. I thought it was really funny, and Dan does a great job. He's the perfect person to do this sketch.
I agree. Dan was great.
LMNO's grouping is similar. Mucus would be LMNucus. Light, although it looks like elemenoid, would be pronounced light. And open would then be elemenopen, as in honey, would you elemenopen the door? Finally, the trash letters, or the letters from P to Z, would make a common stop sign appear like this. So there you have it. We eventually hope to establish the universal metric alphabet by 1979. Join me next time when we explore changes in alphabet soup and spelling bee contest rules. But now, let's sing that old childhood alphabet song, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, as we will hear it in the future. A, B, C, D, F, G, K, L, M, N, O.
It's only one person. It's Dan sitting in front and talking directly to the camera. But for some reason, the sketch felt like there was just so much more in it. Like there was just so much happening. I don't know, between the writing and the performance and the visual aids with the signs. This to me felt like a lot more than just one person in front of the camera. I actually really like this.
Yeah, that's good.
I mean, it is noticeable we haven't seen anything with the host really yet, but
that's true.
If you needed a red flag, there is that at this point.
Well, she's in the next bit when we see Scred and Plubis come out and start looking around, figuring out when they're going to be on the show, and then Raquel comes on.
I love that the Muppets have gone full self-referential at this point. Completely given up on the sets. They've completely embraced the backstage banter of the show as we're not welcome. Especially here, they're like, everybody loves the Muppets. It's just so funny. I think they finally found ways to write for these characters. It's great.
Yeah. And what's interesting is, like, you say that, and I totally was like, is it now just like Jim Henson, Frank Oz, and those guys writing for themselves now? Because that's kind of how it felt.
No, they still were. It was still the SNL crew writing. Although I think the second bit of this, it was the only one that Henson actually wrote. The one we see later on, the callback. But I think once they realized, the writers, as they did on the show themselves, once they realized the Muppets could be done this way, and that pulling back the curtain, they could put that voice to the Muppets, and it worked really well because they could say in the Muppets' voice all the things they were saying about them.
Right. And then Chevy comes out and tries to clear things up for the Muppets and for Raquel, and apologizes because they weren't told, they didn't know they were on. This is after, I should mention, the Muppets make some lewd comments to Raquel Welch.
First of all, Plubis's reaction to Raquel Welch, where she says something about the Muppets, he's like, "That's true, lady." It was such like an offhanded comment before Scred has to tell him who she is. Like, I did love the "That's true, lady" comment.
Yes. No, that was good. They were, again, them with humans is great.
But as you were saying, yeah, Plubis has some lines where he says, "I'm pretty good with my hands," and he starts to grope her or just get all up and rest his head on her chin. And Scred's like, "She feels like Raquel Welch."
Yeah. And then Chevy comes out to, in essence, save her from the Muppets, gets them to walk off. They go away. And then he references her taking her shirt off, because he seemingly does every time he's on stage with her.
Because it's 1976.
Yeah. It's again, one of, like, this entire show, I was like, "Whoa, this wouldn't happen now." You would hope.
You would think.
And then Chevy leaves, and Raquel Welch introduces Phoebe Snow.
Surprise, surprise. This turns into an intro.
Yes.
Go figure.
Got to find different ways to intro musical guests. This is our second time seeing Phoebe Snow.
She's back.
She's back. She was noticeably pregnant last time, if you remember. It's when Paul Simon awkwardly talks about her being pregnant and makes everyone feel weird about it. She sings
All Over.
Yeah, from her new album Second Childhood, which just came out earlier that year. I'm not this is not my thing, but she's good.
I refuse to say anything bad about Phoebe Snow. But no, I did not like this. I feel like we need to move on.
Yeah. I mean, we don't have to say anything bad about her, but we also don't have to like the music. That's perfectly fine too. It was, someone else is into it. And we come back to one of the more recognizable sketches from this period, which is Chevy and Jane as Tom Tryman and Jessica Antler Dance. They were at the Claudine Longet Invitational Ski Championship. And this was one that was on like clip shows when we were younger. I think it's one of the ones that hasn't made it through more iterations of clip shows. But
right. It's
essentially this bit is just footage of downhill skiers falling. And every time they fall, there's a sound effect of a gunshot. And they mention that they were shot by Claudine Longet.
Right.
Do you know who she was?
This one I actually did know is one of the rare instances of a timely 1976 reference that I did know. But yeah, Claudine Longet was about a month earlier shot and accidentally killed her boyfriend. She claims she was looking at his gun and accidentally went off and she shot him. And so I think this originally started out as a Chevy idea. He was going to write a joke for Update. And then O'Donohue took and had this very lampoon idea of like, let's make a sketch out of it and have the video with the sound effects. So you're watching guys fall down and they got shot. And it's at the time, this was probably the most controversial sketch they had.
Yeah.
Claudine Longet had been married to Andy Williams, who either was watching this, he must have been watching it because he had written a letter to NBC and was threatening to sue them,
yes.
Which eventually caused NBC to issue an apology. I think the next episode when they come back, Don Pardo reads an apology for this sketch or for doing this sketch.
I thought Jane and Chevy were both very good in this.
They were good. It bothered me, though, they only had one mic. I felt like they each should have had their own mic. I don't know why.
Weird, right?
It bothered me that he had to share the microphone with her. But it is funny. I do think it's a funny joke. Pop. Ooh, he seems to have been accidentally shot by Claudine Longet.
Right. He's getting up. Oh, nope. He's shot again. That one got him.
Nope, just grazed him. Nope, that one got him. And then they cut to like rapid fire clips of just guys falling.
Yeah, it was good.
I think it's very funny. I like it. I mean, I can see how one, especially if you're very close to the situation, would be offended. And it's also interesting. We talked about a little bit last week about Ron Nessen and the censors. Like this had no problems getting past the censors. They never had any issue with this sketch from start to finish, where there's some other things this episode that the censors had issues with. This one, no one had a problem or said anything with beforehand.
It seems like the censors really only have problems with sex stuff at this point, right?
Yeah, it's weird. There's a bit later on during Update, they had a big issue with something that was not sex related. So it's just like anything. You never know what someone's going to have issues with.
Right.
I think this is one of O'Donohue's best pieces too.
Yes, I agree.
And I guess I'm saying that as a question to you, yes, since I know you don't typically like what he does.
Right. No, I actually was thinking that when I was watching this, for it being a O'Donohue bit, the big ones that he does, I really like. It's the ones that he does with one or two people that I'm not fond of.
Oh, right.
But this one I thought was very good. Part of it was I just really enjoyed Jane and John and Chevy both in this bit. I also enjoyed Jane and John in the next bit doing the Polaroid commercial. It's not even a bit. It's a real commercial.
It's not. I mean, I think they turned it into a bit. We'll get into it, I think. But yeah, no, it was interesting. It's been a while since we've seen one of these. This is one of those legit Polaroid commercials that they did. Have we seen one since Candace was on?
No, because we've only seen them with Candace at this point.
We've only seen them with Candace. This is the first time we're doing one without her. And we've mentioned this before. Like Polaroid had a deal with the show to do X amount of live commercials for the camera. And I think this ends up being, to your point, like an interesting FU to Polaroid, because apparently they had an executive there that day on the show to make sure that it was done straight. No jokes, no goofing around, have it be legit. And Lorne didn't want to, it wasn't a fight he wanted to get into. So he told them, yeah, you just play it straight, do it as it's scripted. And my gut feeling is like John and Jane came up with the idea of like, let's just fucking switch it. Because there's nothing about it other than them literally reading each other's wrong dialogue.
Right.
And so you've got John coming out. hi, I'm Jane Curtin. And I'm like, this isn't that funny. And then, she comes out and plays John's role. And you're like, okay, well, then this is like how they try to make a straight commercial somewhat funny without deviating from the script.
Well, it was funny because when John comes on screen and he says, hi, I'm Jane Curtin, my immediate thought was, could she not get over from the ski set to this set and it just cut too fast? Like, that was my initial reaction. But in watching it more, I was like, oh yeah, no, this is just them. Totally.
This is them saying, fine, we'll read exactly what you've written. Like, we will, but we'll do this.
Yeah. And it's fine. It's a straight commercial.
It's very dry. Because it's not meant to be a bit. So they did what they could.
Yeah. No, and honestly, the Polaroids they took of Jane look great. How great was Jane?
How great was Jane as a photo op?
Well, I don't know that we have many other opportunities to say how great was Jane tonight. So
we don't. And it took me till about almost near the end to realize there's not a lot of Raquel Welch in scenes with the other female cast members. It's all her and dudes. Well, first of all, there's not that many sketches, I guess, but it's just weird. There's that you'd think you'd see more of Jane. You think you'd see more of Gilda. You think you'd see more of Lorraine.
But we had the same thing with the Jill Clayburgh episode where we didn't see Jane at all.
Didn't you see the other ladies more?
Not a lot, though. We keep coming back to this because we said the same thing on the Lily Tomlin episode, right? That they expected there to be a bigger presence from the female writers and female cast, and there just wasn't. And this one, they totally, they stuck Raquel Welch in whenever they could. Just like they did in our next bit, Great Moments in Herstory.
Yes. I'm so excited for you to have to talk about this. Plus, I was also excited to possibly get Raquel Welch in a sketch.
And we do. Raquel Welch plays Jane Russell, and Dan Aykroyd plays billionaire Howard Hughes. And this moment in Herstory, which again, my immediate reaction when I saw this was, oh God, please don't be a runner again. And it wasn't. So that was good.
They gave you that. It wasn't.
Same setup, though. A lot of text on screen that Jane reads about something that happened in 1941. So again, very relevant to the time of 1976. Howard Hughes being in love with Jane Russell and taking over directing of her film, The Outlaw. And then Dan comes on as Hughes. And then it's just like a take on Howard Hughes talking about Jane Russell's breasts, and he created a bra for her. And Garrett brings out this ridiculous looking thing with
propellers on it, and they flop around in the air.
Yeah. And then she won't put it on, so Dan does. And then it turns into another big physical comedy thing where I wrote down more physical comedy this week. That's a lot between Chevy and John, and now Dan and Garrett. And he pulls down Raquel Welch, or she pretends.
I didn't see it coming though, where he puts on the brassiere and they turn the propellers on, and he basically acts as if the bra is getting out of hand. He can't handle it. It's like flying him around the room, and he falls on the ground. Probably because the propellers were so small. I didn't think that was what it was going to lead to, but
yeah, it was another great moment in her story, I guess.
Oh my goodness. Everyone who was part of the show, I think even then knew this was not a great episode. Zweibel's written about it, that it's one of the worst episodes of the season. And there's a great article from, I think, New Times Magazine where they had a reporter on during this week. And even during the rehearsals and the taping of it, they knew they just had nothing going on. So it's like they just tried to get her involved somehow.
Yeah. Maybe she saw the other great moments in her story and was like, I want to be in that.
They had the original meeting in the week. What sketches do you like? What do you want to do? She's like, guys, you've done this amazingly great thing. Samurai? No. Emily Latella? No. I want to do great moments in Herstory.
They're like, no, come on. Bees? Land shark? Anything?
Bees?
Actually, Chevy actually says that in the bit with the Muppets where he's like, I don't know, the land shark or the shark or the bees. Somebody's going to be out
sharks. Yeah.
Well, I was wrong because we do get Jane right after this again, where she announces that Madeline Kahn will be the host next week. But she also says that Madeline Kahn started hosting but didn't finish.
She'll be back. Right. Yeah. So we mentioned it last week with the Ron Nessen episode that there was the technician strike going on. And so that's why a lot of his sketches were very simple and easy and kind of static to camera. And Madeline Kahn was scheduled to be the first host back April 10th. And that the strike had started the end of March. What I'm guessing is by that point, they hadn't figured out how to replace people or make the show, function with what they could do. So that night, and I've read this, I haven't seen it, but the night of April 10th, they do go live and Madeline Kahn's on the stage and it's empty. And she explains to the audience that the show was canceled, and she introduces the rerun. It's a Richard Pryor episode.
Ah.
And then I think they just needed extra time, whether it's, people crossing the picket lines or whatever, to figure out how to get the show up and running. And then they pick it up again with Neeson. So yeah, she was supposed to be on 410 and was there, I think, and they had rehearsed and were trying to put a show together, but couldn't figure out how to pull it off.
Interesting. And from there, we go to Weekend Update. Standard Weekend Update opening. First joke is about Gerald Ford not liking his appearance on SNL.
I did like that they hit that right away. It was good.
Went right for it. And then, again, this was another one where I feels like Chevy's getting his rhythm with Weekend Update and the jokes, and like one after the other after the other.
I think he's getting his rhythm, but I don't think the jokes on this one were that good, unfortunately.
No, that's why I focused.
He's got
on
his rhythm down, and it felt pretty long. Like the first, I actually almost at one point thought they weren't going to go to commercial because it felt like a really long segment. And just as I thought that, they went to commercial, so I was wrong, obviously. But yeah, it just wasn't, he has a long Timothy Leary joke that just completely misses. Or at the end, he's almost hear 3 people in the audience laugh.
Well, yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I felt to this point that the audience was not really into this show.
Into the show?
In general.
I think you're right. There's not a lot there. Again, I said I like the opening and I like the monologue, but after that, there was not a lot there. The Claudine Longet, I feel like they didn't know how to react to it. Like, it's funny, but it's also, you're not there watching it live. They're watching video screen. Right. So maybe something gets lost there. The John and Jane thing was supposed to be straight. Right. So they're just seeing a lot of weird stuff. And so this update doesn't help them very much. So I think you're right. I think the audience in general is just like, what's going on?
Yeah. The Lorraine bit in this didn't help pull the audience back into it.
No, I just don't like this character.
No.
And it was actually written well. Like, I feel like possibly this was written for somebody else other than Lorraine. This time now, instead of doing like a live remote, she's at a desk and she's talking about the polls about people don't know who they're going to vote for. And they do a series of questions where they're like, what sex are you?
Right.
Male, female, I don't know. Why don't you know? I'm confused. And I don't, like, every C answer was, I don't know. And it was kind of written, I think it was done by somebody else, or maybe just not in that weird correspondence character of hers. It might have played a little bit better.
It's interesting because I'm just thinking this now. We never see Lorraine just as Lorraine, right? We see Jane, we see Gilda, we've seen Dan and John.
We haven't yet. No.
Yeah.
They introduce her as Lorraine, but she does this person,
right.
This character, when they introduce her as Lorraine.
And it's a shame because I think you're right. Like, this bit especially could have been better without that weird voice.
Yeah, you're right. Up to this point, she's the only one. Because even Garrett plays Garrett in the Valentine's Day Garrett and Gilda sketch.
Yeah.
So she's the only one who hasn't shown up as herself yet.
Yeah. Well, Garrett comes back to interview Barbara Walters about leaving NBC, and we see Gilda's first Barbara Walters impression.
Yeah.
This was fun.
You could tell that they could feel this was really good. You said the first, she'll go on to do this, I think, 15 more times in the next few years. And it only gets better once they really hone in on her and let her shine on it. So it was fun to see the first time.
I think that's the thing, right? We know that it's coming and it's just going to get better. Right. This was fine. Like, this was funny in and of itself, but it's just going to get better, like you said. So it's exciting.
Yeah, it was. It was good to see.
Yeah. What wasn't great to see? Well, wait, that's not true. It was probably good to see, I guess, was the next commercial, which is another live commercial. Or I guess I don't know what it was, Brad. I guess it was a commercial.
Well, they sold it to you at the end as a bisexual minute. Which it was interesting. They waited to the end to try to sell that joke.
Yeah. Raquel Welch comes out as Gore Vidal. She's in a bathing suit and a cowboy hat.
Well, this is another instance of just being extremely timely and not transferring well, because the whole thing is a joke in reference to this movie she did called Myra Breckenridge, I think it's called, where she plays the title character, which is based off a Gore Vidal book about a transsexual. And this was her attempt to like move away into serious acting, and the movie flopped, and the costume she's wearing is very similar to the costume she wears in the film. So they're like making all these references to stuff probably people at the time remembered and remember this movie being a big flop, but because it was so poorly received 45, 50 years later, most people probably don't remember Gore Vidal. That's probably the closest thing they remember to this. They definitely don't remember the movie. They don't remember the book that it was based. I think it might have hit that end. But again, they don't sell it as what it is until the very end, where they bring up the screen. That was our bisexual minute.
Yeah. When I saw it, I didn't know all the background of this. And I was like, they really were just trying to get her out in a bathing suit. And this is how they did it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, I didn't either until after the show, and I went back to review it all and do the research and everything. And then that's when I learned all that. And even that didn't make it any better. Like sometimes I'll do that. I'll go back and I'll read about things like, oh, this is a lot funnier. Like that Emily Tilla bit about the Russian jewelry. This is something I probably would have known about in 1976. Didn't make it any funnier.
Right. How funny did you think John was as the chief meteorologist again?
I didn't love it. I'll be honest.
It was very much the same as the last one, right?
I think it was the same but not as good. I don't think it was as good.
Yeah, I agree.
He comes out as the meteorologist. This week's topic is songs written about the weather. This is an interest where the censors did come in. You know, O'Donoghue writes these for Belushi, and he's doing all these things about, what is it? Rain on My Parade. Don't Rain on My Parade. That's the song, right?
Yeah.
And he starts listing all these other possible worst titles. And one of the original ones that was written was Take a Dump on My Parade. And the censors wouldn't let him say, take a dump.
Really?
Yeah. So, but like, again, Claudine Langer, no problem. But you can't say the word dump. And so, of course, so now O'Donoghue tried to figure out what's the most ridiculous and obscene thing I can think of to replace it with. It became the Drain Your Boils one.
Yeah.
Drain Your Boils on My Parade. But it's just interesting, again, of what the censors do and do not allow. And much like in the monologue where you didn't like him falling on the ground and the rolling around the ground, I felt the heart attack on this was just so forced. And
right.
Yeah. I just,
again, it was the same as last time where it was like, that was the out. It felt unnecessary.
Right.
Well, it was necessary to restart the next bit because John Sebastian is introduced by Raquel Welch and starts playing his hit, the theme song from Welcome Back, Kotter.
I have to be honest. I completely forgot that he did this song. And like he starts playing the chords. And my first thought was, is he really going to play the theme song to Welcome Back, Kotter? Like that's his performance? Yes.
Yeah.
And then like you said, I love he messed it up twice. He took him 3 times to get it going.
Yeah. I think like there was feedback from his mic when he first started singing. It totally threw him off.
Yes.
And he tried to regain it. He turns, he's like, can we start over? And someone said, no, keep going. So he tried to.
I missed that part. Okay.
Well, you don't see that.
I mean, I saw him say, can we keep going? I couldn't hear the keep going.
No, I don't think you heard. I'm sorry. I'm projecting that's what someone said because he then just turns and tries to get back into it and completely goes off the rails and just starts over.
Yeah, he gives it another like 10 seconds. Then he's like, we're done. Let's just stop.
Yeah.
And
he just starts laughing.
Back in.
It was good.
Yeah. But it's a great instance of the show being live. Like, that's great. Stop your song. Start over again. Good for you.
And then it was fine. Then it was good.
It is a catchy tune.
Oh, it's yeah.
It's a damn catchy tune. Although he tried to get the audience involved to sing along. And I wonder, my first thought was he couldn't get them into it. But then, and I remember thinking about the strike and all, maybe they just didn't have the technology, the capability to record the audience properly because I can't believe they didn't sing along, but you can't hear them.
Right. And maybe this all leads to it feeling like the crowd was not into the show because you didn't hear anything. So maybe they just didn't have mics in the audience.
Oh, in general for the night. Could be. Yeah, it could. I mean, there also wasn't a lot of funny stuff to be laughed out loud about.
Right.
But you might be right. The mixing or whatever, they may not have been able to capture the audience as well as you could have, which, yes, would lead to the overall poorness of you feeling this going over on everybody. Yeah.
And then for some reason, John comes out as Joe Cocker and holds the harmonica for him. And I didn't know why that needed to happen.
No, it did not need to at all.
No.
This song becomes number 1. This was like a number 1 song.
Right? It's crazy.
Goddamn 1976. The theme song to Welcome Back, Kotter can be the number 1 song.
It was a huge show.
And I was thinking, just as I was talking about last week's guest and Patti Smith, this is great. You know, they get somebody kind of current or hip. And then we get our guest this week. And I'm like, oh, they go back to getting like artists that aren't that popular. I'm like, nope. John Sebastian, number 1. Welcome Back, Kotter.
I thought that too about Phoebe Snow when you were talking about like all the old hits and everything. It's like, nope, she's singing new original pieces in both times she sang.
Yeah.
And he sings an original piece too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Also original was the next bit, which is the most classic bit from this episode.
Mm-hmm.
which is where we go to Lorne at his office with a picture of a cartoon picture of Richard Nixon this time.
Oh, I thought it was the same photo.
Maybe it is, but you can definitely tell that it's like a hand-drawn thing. Anyway, and he famously offers the Beatles $3,000 to come to reunite and come on Saturday night.
Yeah, this is a great piece. As bad as this episode is, Alan Zweibel has also gone on to say, like, this sketch is what he thinks most defined the show as far as like their sensibility and their comedy and the way they were trying to be and who they were trying to be. I believe there was an offer that happened like a couple days prior where someone had offered, it was a promoter, the guy I think who originally brought the Beatles to America, like upwards over $200 million for them to reunite and tour and perform again. And so this is basically another example of the show being extremely timely. Like last week, we had the Supreme Court sketch that happened days after that verdict came down. They're just taking stuff that happens in the news literally that week and turning into something hilarious. Where then Lorne Michaels, of course, here's only $3,000.
Right.
Now, here it is, as you can see, verifiably, it is a check made out to you, the Beatles, for $3,000. All you have to do is sing 3 Beatle tunes. She Loves You, Yeah, 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 that's $1,000 right there. You know the words, it'll be easy. Like I said, this check here is made out to the Beatles. You divide it any way you want. If you want to give Ringo less, that's up to you. I'd rather not get involved. I'm sincere about this. If it helps you to reach a decision to reunite, well then, it's worth the investment. You have agents. You know where I can be reached. Just think about it, okay? Thank you.
It's so good. It's so fun. And it's so quintessential of SNL at the time and the kind of humor they were doing. And Zweibel, I guess, wrote a lot of this too. It's a Lorne Michaels piece, but I think he wrote it with Alan Zweibel, and Zweibel gave a lot of the one-liners in there.
I mean, they made a movie centered around this moment in TV.
They did?
They did. Because you know that John Lennon and Paul McCartney were apparently watching Saturday Night Live, right?
I thought you meant about the sketch. Yes. The McCartney-Lennon thing, yes.
Yes. So then and it was the early 2000s, it was a film called Two of Us that is a fictional retelling of John and Paul being at the Dakota watching SNL and talking about potentially getting in a cab and going downtown.
Right, because the story is they were actually hanging out that night watching Saturday Night Live, and they saw the sketch and they were debating to each other, like, should we go down? We should go down. And I mean, the lore of it all, they said they were too tired or something to leave, but they legitimately considered for a couple minutes that they were going to come down. Yeah,
which would have been amazing.
Could you imagine? Oh my God. I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility. There's a story Bernie Brillstein talks about when he talks about how he knew the show was going to be something because at one point after Belushi had done the Cocker impression on the show, Paul McCartney had reached out to pay him some ridiculous amount of money to come and do that impression at his birthday party. So the show was so the show was on the at least his radar, so he knew of it. So that's why it's not like completely not unbelievable that they would be. I mean, the fact they're hanging out is probably the most unbelievable part of that story, but not the fact that one of or two of them are watching Saturday Night Live at this point.
I just recently saw an interview from John Lennon around this time, or not long before he died, and he was talking about how when Paul was in New York, whether he was touring or he was recording there or whatever.
Oh, I think I saw,
he would just show up to the Dakota and be like, hey, you want to hang out? And John would be like, yes.
He's like, dude, we're not 20 anymore.
Exactly.
I have a life. My wife's in the other room. Oh, sorry, mate.
Yeah. That's funny.
But yeah, no, that's like one of the most infamous like Saturday Night Live folklore stories that John Lennon and Paul McCartney almost came down. It would have been insane. That would
have been crazy.
Oh my God. Which I think it had to have gotten back to the show relatively quickly because that had to play somewhat into them continuing that Beatles joke week after week that we're going to see soon.
Yeah. Right. It's a good bit. I mean, it's amazing, right? It's a cultural moment. Well, another cultural moment of the time was taken up by the Bees, and we have the Bees come back for the first time in a long time. they do One Flew Over the Hornet's Nest, which is just a take on One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, where John plays McMurphy, Chevy plays Chief, Raquel Welch is Nurse Ratched, Dan is Billy, Gilda's Broccoli. And the whole bit is just they want to watch the Oscars.
I mean, nobody liked this sketch. Like you said, the Oscars were a month before. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest swept the Oscars. It's an interesting idea to put the bees in there so you can get the bees back. One Flew Over the Hornet's Nest. But apparently nobody, like writers, cast, nobody liked this sketch and they all wanted to drop it. And Lauren refused on the idea of it added balance to the show because he said if we took this sketch out, all it is a show about Raquel Welch's breast. And like, he's right. Like, this is the only sketch with her that does not revolve around that. So I get why he kept it, but it feels like just nobody wanted to be there. Like, no one tries.
John does an interesting Jack Nicholson impression.
I didn't like it.
Well,
his energy was so low. It's probably one of the worst performances he's done this season, unfortunately. He's just so low key. Like the arguing when he's getting people to raise their hand. The only thing I thought that was really funny in this, Gilda.
I thought Gilda and
Gilda's
Dan,
face is hilarious.
Yes. Gilda was great, but I like Dan too as Billy.
Oh, as Billy, the guy, the stutterer. Yeah. No, he did him well.
He did
him well.
exactly.
Yeah.
And Swibel, he doesn't have any lines, but he just like
he just sits there.
Yeah, John has them put their hands up, and then it pulls back to a shot at the end, like 4 minutes later, and Swibel's arm is still up in the air, and he's still smiling.
The one I noticed was they pull back, and everyone starts to put their hands down.
Yeah,
and then Chevy starts to put his up.
Yeah,
Chief in the background. That's I enjoyed that kind of Chevy humor where.
Well, that's what Chief does in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Oh, was it that same thing that late?
Like Chief comes up late, and like
I haven't seen that movie in so long.
Yeah, Nurse Ratchet's like, he's like, we got Chief to vote, and Nurse Ratchet's like, the voting is closed, and he's like, that's when he loses his shit.
Did Chief also drop his mop in the movie?
And then reference it? I don't. Yeah,
you hate that. See, again, I love it. Like Chevy makes a mistake.
No.
Mop.
Yeah, no,
it was funny.
That time I thought it worked. I mean, it bothered me that Chevy all of a sudden. That Chevy all of a sudden was Indian and not Native American.
Well, I was going to say, can we talk about what we don't like is what was going on with Chevy's accent?
Yeah, that was,
that's just
unnecessary.
Not good.
Yeah. Also, to defend Lauren for a minute on keeping this sketch, if he cut this sketch, he had over 8 minutes to fill. This sketch was 8 minutes long. And I was like, this just keeps going. Like it
does. Well, the first half isn't bad because you get what they're doing and it's kind of funny. And I got to say, Raquel Welch, Nurse Ratched, not bad.
Yeah. No.
Like it wasn't stiff or hard. Like it was fairly good. It played well. But then he does that where she starts saying, there's 12 people on the floor. And he starts making jokes about vegetables in basket case by grabbing literally a basket of vegetables. And it's just like that, to your point, where is this going?
Yeah.
And then he and McMurphy and Chief hold their own Oscar ceremony.
Yeah.
And they ask for the letter and Gilda's eating the letter.
Yes.
Pull it out of her mouth. And then they announce that, yes, Louise Fletcher wins Best Actress. And then they make a joke about Louise Fletcher when she does the sign language, but she's trapped inside the nurse's station. She can't open the glass to give her acceptance speech. So she starts doing sign language, which was a joke on the actual Louise Fletcher, whose parents are deaf. And when she accepted the award, she thanked them in ASL. But I don't know. The energy was just so off on this. And the length of it was so long.
I think that's really what killed this whole thing. It was too long.
It was.
The next bit was not very long. We come back to Gilda. Does Don Pardo introduce Gilda's equal time, or is it just a title card that comes up?
I think it's just a title card.
And it's just another Gilda 2 camera. This time, instead of talking about what she ate, she talks about Raquel Welch and how difficult it is for her being a sex symbol and all these things that she's seen in the last week working with Raquel Welch, and how hard it is for her, and how she has seen Raquel Welch naked. She goes into this whole thing about how she did that and why, and that her body and Raquel Welch's bodies are the same, but hers is, I forget what she
needs regrouping was her line.
Whatever. This whole thing just was an intro for a Gary Weiss film.
Yeah. You know who wrote this?
Not Swibel.
No. Louise Lasser wrote this.
Really?
apparently he was a big fan of the show and knew a lot of the people and would hang out. Like when she was in New York City, she'd hang out at the show a bunch. And so she basically wrote this for Gilda to do and put on because she was there that week.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, whatever. It was.
You're like, doesn't make it any better.
No, in fact, it does not. It's just another weird way.
It's another intro.
Yeah. And it intros Gary Weiss's film, which is even weirder than what we just heard from Gilda. It is just footage of Raquel Welch dancing on white.
Yeah. See, I don't think that's weird. By now, we've realized Gary Weiss's films, they're not narrative. They're often experimental or weird. So the fact that this was just literally a film of her dancing, I didn't think was that weird. This actually seems something to me Gary Weiss would do. I was waiting for it to lead to something. I will be honest. I was waiting for something to eventually happen and it not just be her dancing for 5 minutes. But no, it's literally just her in a skimpy outfit dancing for 4 or 5 minutes.
Well, every other Gary Weiss film has been about real people. Even the one that Buck Henry was in, he was interviewing the real people and talking about them. This one is...
Did you forget the Pet trilogy already?
They're real people talking about their pets. Sorry, I don't count pets as people like you apparently do.
I would argue they were not about people. Those films were about animals, but regardless.
Yeah, this was just a bunch of footage of Raquel Welch dancing both in slow motion and regular speed.
There's some weird slow motion shots of like her intercut with her doing the dancing, which were odd. But in researching this episode, there's a lot of times where, again, one of the issues the show has at this point is the very male dominant writer's room and mentality. And so a lot of times people, like, she would often ask about sketches or stuff for the show, and they would kind of push her away and focus on the songs and whatnot. So I actually wonder if this was a way that the show was trying to get her out of their quote unquote hair, as to say, go with Gary Weiss and go shoot a short film like today or something like that. Right. So they didn't have to deal with her. But by the time we eventually get to the end of this, I feel like Gary Weiss went to the Albert Brooks School of Editing for this film. Because it just kept going and going.
It was very long and just gratuitous shots of Raquel Welch, who then after break is on stage with Phoebe Snow, promoting a charity function that Phoebe Snow has at Madison Square Garden. And Raquel Welch is like, I hope to join you. Now sing another song for us.
Right over her shoulder. Yes. We're right back to the quintessential Saturday Night Live awkward host standing next to the musical act to try to casually introduce their next performance.
Right. Very weird. Yeah. And then Phoebe Snow sings Two-Fisted Love, another song from her recent album, Second Childhood. Did you like this one anymore?
No.
Yeah. All right.
But again, it's Phoebe Snow. I can't say bad things.
Well, because the performance isn't bad. It's just not our bag.
No.
My note on the next bit was Raquel Welch booked to sing? Because she comes back and sings another number.
Like I was saying, there, in an effort to not have the entire show be full of Raquel Welch boob jokes, this was something she had planned. And it's funny you were talking about if you pulled the Hornet sketch, you're missing 8 minutes. What do you put in? The show actually, after Dress, had gone long, and there was this, and there was a sketch with her and Lorraine Newman, where Lorraine Newman played this Italian female director. She's the first female director nominated for an Oscar. It's like Lena Wertmuller or something like that. But basically, after Dress, Lauren went up to Raquel Welch and said, "We have to lose something. We can either lose this sketch or your song number." And not surprisingly, she kept the song. So she always had planned to do this song. Yeah.
All right.
In hindsight, a sketch with Lorraine would have been much better.
Talking about old songs, like this is from...
Listen, Saturday Night Live could not go an episode without doing a 30s cover song. And this is our 30s cover song this episode.
It ain't necessarily so from Porgy and Bess.
Check that box.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess, you give Lauren a little credit here where he does let the hosts, do what they want to do. And they do have a lot of input in the show. Like I said, she didn't like the take off your shirt sketch, so it got pulled. And the show's running long, and Lauren gives the host the choice of what do you want to do. So I give a little bit of credit to that. Again, unfortunately, did I need to see yet another song? No, but I'm struggling to find nice things to say.
Let me ask you a question, though.
Please.
And this is not against Lorne Michaels, but just thinking, You have this host that you've been dealing with all week, and you know you can't get much out of her.
Right.
Is it then in your best interest to put on the best show to ask that host what sketch she wants to pull? Like, shouldn't you, as the producer of the show, say, this is stronger than that, so I need to put this on. Sorry, Raquel Welch, you can't sing the song from Porgy and Bess.
I'm going to say in season 1, no. Because they're still trying to establish themselves. This isn't season 3 or 4 where SNL is the thing. I think even to this point, we mentioned this in Rob Reiner, granted that was only episode 3, but I still think at this point, you're reliant on the host. You want the host to do well and be excited about being on the show. So if you know she really wants to do this song and you say, oh, we're not going to do it and put this sketch on instead, I think you're more worried that with a difficult host, or maybe not the most funny, that their energy or their excitement is going to be even less. And you don't want to do anything to take away from that.
Okay.
That's my argument as to why he would do that.
All right. I just felt like
I could be wrong, but
right.
I know what you're saying. Like, it's your show, you run it.
Right.
I feel like with someone like this who's as unknown and you don't know what they're going to do and you're already worried things aren't going that well, let's not pull something they want and have them be even more unhappy before we go live in front of 20 million people.
Okay. That's fine. That's fair.
And when in doubt, just put more Muppets on.
Well, that's what they do. We come back to Plubus and Scred looking for the mighty Favog, who we haven't seen in a while, to ask him for advice on being kicked off the show. And essentially his advice...
And Favog's pretty much like, you're done.
Yeah.
We're done, guys.
It's like, get in the trunk.
Yeah,
and there's literally...
If you can open it. If you can actually
yes.
open it.
There's a trunk right there, and all of the other Muppets are in there. And
what's her name?
I don't know.
Mrs. Plubis, as you refer to her?
Plubis, yeah. She comes out, and they have to break it to her that they're just Muppets, and there's not whatever. I thought watching this, like, oh, is this the farewell of the Muppets? Because that's what it felt like.
I did too. It does feel like it. They do appear, I think, twice more. I think they're one more this season, and early next season they come back, which I think are just kind of send-offs. But I think this is the one possibly too that might have been written by Jim Henson, but I don't know, because it still feels very SNL voice-like. So I don't know. I had read that one of these was written by Jim Henson himself, but I don't know.
Well, I wonder. I'm curious to watch next week's to see what it is, because if it's not meta like this is, then I wonder if it just had been written for the Madeline Kahn show that wasn't aired. But I feel like they're full on into this meta bit now. They're not going to go back. I mean, they burned the sets. You've heard them. They burned the Land of Gorge. It's gone. That's what they tell us.
I would really love to see footage. What they should have done then is like done a cutaway to Michael O'Donoghue, just like sitting there with the gasoline, lighting a match.
That would have been funny.
Oh, well.
And that's it. Then we go to our good nights, which is Raquel Welch on stage. And Chevy comes on with a telegram or a mailgram. I don't know.
A mailgram. I didn't get the joke. Telegram versus mailgram. I wasn't.
It's because we weren't alive.
Another 1976 joke.
But he has a telegram from someone who's about to die, and they really enjoyed the show and her performances, and they just want her to take her shirt off because. And she does unbutton her shirt, and the whole bit is supposed to...
She rips it. She doesn't unbutton. She does the full-on...
Right. She rips it off, and it's a blue screen top.
Yeah.
And then it has footage of like ships or a rocket taking off. And
yeah, originally this is a Chevy joke, and it was, I think, comprised between him and O'Donoghue, and it was supposed to be footage, I think, of the Hindenburgs, like 2 Hindenburgs exploding, and that's what they wanted originally. I don't know why it didn't ever become that, but there was another Chevy gag that he wanted to do that they ended up not doing, which is throughout the night, he wanted, the idea was that the cameraman would continually just focus on her cleavage, like either like tilt down or zoom in or pan down, and he didn't want it to, the idea, or his idea of it too, was not to tell Raquel Welch, that they would just do it. And then so on air, the camera would just be doing these things. And Lauren nixed that idea, which is funny because they do something very similar. I think they, or at least add to it again on the Dolly Parton episode where she's hosting in her monologue, the camera zooms in, but then they also have, in that bit, they have a guy on high wire, like above her. So he's like shooting straight down into her cleavage during the monologue. Yeah. So it's funny that there's like 2 gags and bits from this episode that don't get used, and 15 years later they recycle them for Dolly Parton.
Well, all in all, it was not a great show.
No, it was not. You know, I don't know what to say. It's like you get a host that they don't know what to do with, that isn't bringing a lot to the table. And unfortunately, you know, most of the jokes the staff wants to do is very one note, and it's a note that she's not into. So, yeah, I don't know.
Right. As opposed to Ron Nessen, right? That was a lot of one note jokes, but they worked because he bought in. They were also
because he was into it. Yeah.
Much less offensive. Right? Like,
yeah.
Press secretary jokes are much different than take your shirt off jokes constantly. So,
yeah, this was just a big, I think, disconnect between host and show, which I don't know if we've seen yet. You know, we've had hosts that are seemingly on paper, you're like, why are they here? How are they going to fit? You know, your Anthony Perkins, your Desi Arnaz, even your maybe Dick Cavett, but they somehow find a way to coexist, where this feels like they just never found common ground. They never found a way to incorporate the host and what she wanted, and she just also didn't get the opportunities to get incorporated into the show and the comedy. So you just nothing really worked.
No, and the two times we saw her in sketches, she was better in the One Flew sketch than she was in the
Jane Russell thing.
Jane Russell. Thank you. But
I didn't mind her in the few sketches. Like I said, those instances. I thought again, who do we say this for? Like the sketches she's in, she does okay. Like she does fine. It's a shame they didn't give her more. Like I would have loved to seen the Raquel Welch, Lorraine Newman sketch as opposed to her singing. Like if nothing else, it would have given us more female cast to see during the episode. But
right. Well, Brad, what's your best bit?
Beatles offer obviously is a no-brainer, and I put the Claudine Longet Invitational. I think they're both great. Yeah,
I had those two, and
yeah, sadly, there's nothing else in the episode I would say you should even think about watching. Like we've complained about this episode much, and somehow there are two best bits, and they're pretty classic bits. But yeah, the rest of the episode is just. I mean, it started off so promising. I liked the opening. I loved the Joe Cocker. I thought that we were in for some good stuff, and it just never delivered.
When the next most entertaining thing that happened was John Sebastian having to restart his song, that's when you know it's not a great show.
Yeah.
Well, it is what it is. Next week, we're going to talk about Season 1, Episode 19 with host Madeline Kahn and musical guest Carly Simon, making what they have said repeatedly in this episode a very rare television appearance. Yeah.
Yeah. This will be good.
I love Madeline Kahn. I'm looking forward to it. Until then, good night and have a pleasant tomorrow.
Good night and have a pleasant tomorrow.